Hey everybody, what do you say? Gannon here, JJ59, and it's been a little while since I made a video, and geez, I think it's been about 3 weeks, and I thought I would get myself back into the game, as it were. Um, Today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk a little bit about the 1968 Top Set, which was the first set that I really seriously collected as a kid. Previous to that, I had done some collecting, some Yogi Bear cards when I was really young, but even some 1964, every year up to 68. But just a few cards from each year, and but it wasn't really until 1968 that I, A, became a baseball fan, and B, really started to love and collect baseball cards. Um, yeah, again, to try to uh, give you an idea of what it was like to actually collect that year. I lived this set. I watched the cards come out all through the spring and the summer and the fall. And yeah, I just loved it, and I still do. It's my sentimental favorite, really. And there was no talk of it being the burlap set. No talk of that whatsoever. Uh, these cards are great. Okay, the design is great, and the backs of the cards are great. Topps really started to drop the ball after 19. Well, I don't know. I'd say I wasn't happy with the backs to the 71 set. 1970 set, the backs were amazing. The 72 set was difficult to read. 73, okay. But then I feel like after that, they started to drop the ball. I don't know. They kind of had the same generic back that they used over and over, largely. But you look at the backs of these cards, right? And got a couple Willie Mazes there. I mean, easy to read. The contrast between the background and the black print. I mean, you know, you don't need an atomic microscope to try to decipher what's going on. And one interesting thing about the set, okay, this is no news, but if you look at I have all the checklists here, right? And in the first series, you'll notice that the speckles or the red dots of the burlap were spaced further apart than on later cards. Now, the second series checklist was in the first series. Right, we should see it somewhere here. I'm looking through the camera, so it's not as easy to find it. There it is. Down at the bottom, card 107, checklist, second series. And you'll see that it also has, since it's in the first series, the checklist is in the first series, the red specks are far apart. But as soon as you get to card 110, which is Hank Aaron, which is the first card in the second series, the red specks are lighter and not as close together. And all the cards from there on follow the same pattern as the Hank Aaron. They all look like that. Just an interesting, whatever, fact about the 68 set. And, gosh, he had some great cards in that first series, right? Now, you know what? I collect this set a little bit differently than I do any of my other sets. I'm not trying to complete it. I once actually had the complete set, which I bought from the back of some periodical, probably probably Baseball Digest. I bought a complete set for $18 back in like 1972 or 3. And about 20 years ago, I needed a little money, and I sold the set. And so I did have the complete set at one point. But of course, when you collect, sometimes you get doubles, triples, quadruples of a card, and that's what I'm kind of trying to do with the '68 set. I'm remembering some of my favorite cards, and I'm grabbing sometimes more than one copy. And this was my first introduction to Willie Mays. I looked on the back of his card, and I saw that at that point he had already had 564 home runs, so I knew he was good. I had how many? I had two copies of this card. These aren't the copies that I had as a kid. I got these off of eBay. Yeah. What do I want to say next? One thing that was cool about this set was the manager cards. I just used to look at these, and I don't know, some of the guys looked really cool to me. I thought Eddie Stanky looked really cool there. He looks really cool. I didn't know anything about him. Didn't know he played for the New York Giants or that he was known as kind of a dirty player. That was Eddie. That was Eddie Stanky. I just thought he was a cool looking cat. Same thing with Alvin Dark. I thought he was cool. And then, on the back of the cards, they had nice write-up. They expected kids to read then. They expected kids to read. Kids read. In the school library, you had books with words. They were written in a way, they were written for kids, and they were written well. And, you went to the library once a week, and you got some books. But yeah, Alvin Dark. I remember just looking at Herman Franks. Who was this guy? Who's Herman Franks? Manager of the Giants. Then Dick Williams. The previous year, he led the Red Sox to the American League pennant, although they lost to the Cardinals in the series. Hank Bauer, former Yankee. Managed the Orioles to the World Championship in 1966 of the Dodgers, sweeping them. And now here's Ralph Houck, and on the card here on the right, I do believe it's my original Ralph Houck. And I may be wrong about this, but you can see that the card is pretty frayed. And what happened was, back in 1968, right? Okay, well, of course, that's what we're talking about. I did not have a Mickey Mantle card, and I had a friend, Jeff. We were in the, I guess at that point, we would have been in the fourth grade together. I mentioned it to him. He had been collecting, before I had started that year. And I told him, hey, I asked him, do you have a Mickey Mantle? I said, yeah, sure, I have a Mickey Mantle. And we were both on the Huntington YMCA swim team, and he brought the Mickey Mantle to swim team practice. I don't know if he also brought a Ralph Houck, and the reason why I'm mentioning it is because, he gave me this, and this is not the card my friend Jeff gave me, but he gave me at least a Mickey Mantle. He may have given me this Ralph Houck. But what happened was I put the Mickey Mantle right into my gym bag. And after swim team practice, I kept it in the bag with my wet towel, my wet bathing suit. And, no sooner had I left the locker room than this card, the mantle, got so frayed. I mean, it was crazy. It looked like it had been through a world war. And the Houck is similar to the Mantle, although it is not as frayed, nowhere near as frayed as the Mantle was. So I don't know if, Jeff had given me both of these cards that day. But The effect was the same, although, believe me, the mantle was much more furled up and frayed than this one. And foolishly, I held on to it for a long time, and I think I got rid of it. I said, "Oh, I don't need this anymore. I've got the one, and that's in the complete set." But then, of course, I sold the complete set, so then I ended up not having any. And then what happened was my son got me this Mickey Mantle off of eBay as a present for me, and so this one really means a lot to me that he would go and do that. So yeah, I was actually in a slab, and I busted it out, but I did a lousy job, and I think I put a slight wrinkle in it up here where there hadn't been a wrinkle before. But I love this card, and I love it because my son Barry gave it to me. And, just more of the manager's cards here. Larry Shepard took over for a little while. Danny Murtaugh came back, I think, in 1970. Luman Harris on the Braves. Dave Bristol on the Reds. Cal Irmer on the Twins. And the Gil Hodges. And this one here on the right, I believe, may be the original one that I had. The reason why I'm not sure is because I gave most of my collection to a friend of mine years ago after I got remarried, and when he realized I regretted it, he worked to give me as many cards back as we could find because he had mixed them in with his cards. But I'm 99.99999% sure that this one was the one I had as a kid, and you can see it's like definitely weathered. But something struck me about Gil Hodges the first time I looked at him, looking at this card, and I just used to contemplate, his countenance, looking at this for, long periods of time, and I just think this is such a great card. And he was a great man. Jim Lemon. He took over for Gil Hodges when Gil Hodges came to the Mets, and then Ted Williams came in after him. Then, of course, the two managers, Mayo Smith of the Tigers, Red Schoendienst of the Cardinals, who led their teams to the World Series that year. And, oh, what a great series that was. The Tigers being down 3-1 and coming back to win the World Series. Mickey Lolich pitching 3 complete games. Bob Gibson famously struck out 17 batters the first game of the series. I saw all those games. Yeah. Another great thing about the 68 set are the team cards. Each team card used different colors. I just love the Dodgers card. As you can see, I got 4 copies. Whoops. My reaction to the cards, the way the cards, each card was different with different colors, and it gave me a feeling about each team. Oh, I love these cards, man. The colors gave me a feeling about each team. Just, Tigers, Braves, the Orioles, the Pirates team. Each one had its own feeling. Oh, there's another Braves team. They didn't have a Yankees card that year. There were a couple teams they didn't have cards for. One was the Yankees. And Denny Matthews, I think, is definitely an original, as is the Elston Howard. You can see certainly the Matthews is weathered. The Elston Howard, I love it. It's weathered in a really nice way. They're like, fine old wines. Love that. And Tommy Tresh, he was my sister's favorite player, and I'm pretty sure this is the card I had when I was a kid, when I got back from my friend. This one is going out to Picker Jim. We don't suck, Jim. uh, I was telling Picker Jim the story about how one day, once a week we went to religious instructions, and we get out, and I remember standing on the street corner waiting for the bus, and this kid named Timmy Hood, he was a nice guy, a little wild, he was just, all of a sudden he blurts out, "Anybody who doesn't have game 5 sucks." And, I started collecting a little bit later than most of the guys that year. And, I said, "Damn, game 5. I don't have game 5." And I knew I didn't suck if I didn't have game 5, but I wanted to get game 5. Eventually I got game 5. And the World Series run, the 8 cards, the 8 World Series cards, I should have taken them out. I have the complete set in a binder page. They're really great. And, the cards imitated TV, and Jim Lonborg, won game 5 for the Red Sox. Real quick, a couple of, couple of specialty cards. I think this was mine. And I think this was mine. But I know this was mine. This one I never gave away because Mickey Mantle was my favorite player. I got to see him play that year. And he hit a single, too, as I remember. Playing first base. So many great cards from that set. I'm going to wrap it up real quick. As you can see, again, the cards from the first series, the red dots, are further apart than what they later came to be in the remaining series, series 2 through 7. There were 7 series. What was it, 598 cards? Let's see. Yep, 598 cards. Danny McLean, of course, won 31 games that year. Last pitcher to ever win 30 games. And probably will be the last pitcher to ever win 30 games. And Gene Michael, who was a very smooth fielding shortstop for the Yankees. Really graceful. And his double play partner was Horace Clarke. And Horace Clarke gets a bad rap. He was a good second baseman. And, they sometimes refer to the period between 1965 and 1976 as the Horace Clarke years, because those were the years the Yankees, didn't, they actually had some good teams in the early 70s. They won 93 games in 1970. And they contended, I remember, 1972 and other years as well. And anyway, they were a good double play combination. I'm going to end it with a story. This is my favorite Roger Maris card. And again, I learned about Roger Maris. I had a baseball book, and I learned that he'd hit 61 home runs, and he was a teammate of Mickey Mantle. And, I wanted to get a Roger Maris card, but I couldn't find one that year. And, how did it work? My friend Douglas told me about his friend, who I also knew. His name was Chris. And he said, "Hey, Chris might have one." And so I asked Chris if he had one. He said, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, come on over. I'll give you one." And I think I don't know if I took the bus home with them the next day from after school, or my mom drove me over. I lived on Crescent Beach Drive. Douglas lived on Locust Lane, and Chris lived off Locust Lane. But I remember first going to Douglas's house, and then we walked up the block and made the left onto the street Chris lived. And Chris was out on the front lawn with some of his friends, and I said, "Hey, Chris, man, hey." I said, "Hey." So he had the cards right there, went through them, and took out Roger Maris. And again, that one sadly is lost. I don't know where that is, but you know, what he did. I'll just never forget what he did. He was such a great kid. I look back at him, and he was just the nicest guy. He was kind of like a prince, really. There's something about him. He had this aura. He really shined, and he just gave me the Roger Maris because I wanted one. I think maybe kids. I like the way we as kids dealt with the cards back then. We weren't thinking about condition, resale value, grades, none of that nonsense. And I had a whole lot of 1968s, and I remember I'd gotten the complete set, which was in a binder, and I had all my 68s that I'd collected. They were in a big brown shopping bag, and I remember giving a whole bunch to two of my nephews, actually cousins, because they're the kids of my cousins, yeah. And they really enjoyed the cards, and it was cool because that was back in the early '90s, and they were only like 8, 9 years old, and 1968 was like another century to them, and it was great to be able to pass on the cards, some of the cards to them. I really enjoyed doing that. Anyway, that's really about it. I just wanted to share some memories of when I collected in 1968. And that was the last year you had the two leagues before the divisions. And you had real pennant races where the winning team was truly awarded, and the winning teams got to participate in the World Series. So anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. If you stayed with me this long, I really appreciate you staying. And I think I talked about Doug Rader in a previous video. This card always cracked me up. So on behalf of Doug Rader, and I'd like to say goodbye and hope everybody has a great weekend, and we'll talk again soon. All right, take care. Bye-bye.